and for me, it just makes me realize how much I miss this place and all the people, and it's really a pleasure to be back here. So Kisu Kyukid, and I will say, since I'm coming from the east, Akwai Tonkatayenu. I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to share with you, as Lori said, a little bit about my journey. Some of this is actually, I haven't even told my students some of the things I'm about to tell you. So I hope you'll bear with me, and we'll get started. I'm sure most of you have seen this quote before, and it sort of represents to me my starting point in the field. And I'm going to read a little bit of my formal paper just to get us started. I have a problem. I'm an anthropologist. More specifically, I'm an archaeologist. And I love being an archaeologist. I wanted to be an archaeologist ever since I was a teenager. I volunteered on my first archaeological dig when I was 14. I was hired for my first archaeology job when I was 19. I've been working in the field ever since. I'm a North Americanist. That is, I'm interested in studying Native American culture and history. I can identify dozens of projectile points, Native American ceramics, and many kinds of stone tools. I've excavated sites, 9,000-year-old archaic sites, all the way through reservation-era sites. So here's the problem. I knew from nearly the start that archaeology is highly problematic to American Indian people. By the way, I have references here. I have like 2 pages of references. The history of the field includes the desecration, destruction of graves, sacred sites, and cultural properties of all kinds, the objectification of native people, culture, and history, as well as denigrating and disregarding the beliefs and preferences of the tribes. This has been well documented through Indian country by myself and others. And so then I have another 2 pages of references. Even when I was still in graduate school, I would describe the field of archaeology as the scientific arm of the colonial enterprise. And of course, I wasn't the first to make this observation. However, many archaeologists chose to ignore this. So how to reconcile the love I had for my chosen field and its heinous history? For me, the solution was working with contemporary Native communities to create a new kind of archaeology, one that acknowledges the history of the field, but values Native perspectives, priorities, and values. This became, by the way, these slides are 2 from Mohegan country. This is a guy named Edward Rogers, and this is a guy named Bert Solwin. And they're excavating at the principal 17th century fortified village of the Mohegans. This is the village of Uncas, Fort Shantok. And it was a mecca for amateur archaeologists, as in the case of Rogers, and professional archaeologists in the case of Solwin. He conducted 8 years of archaeological field schools there, first under Columbia University and later New York University, and caused great destruction to the site. It is a National Historic Landmark, and therefore it has national significance. It's been recognized as having national significance to the history of the United States, but more importantly, since it's the principal village of the Mohegans, it's crucially and singularly important to their history and culture. So back to this. So this becomes known as Indigenous archaeology, as coined by Joe Watkins in 2000. So I started working on behalf of contemporary Indian tribes as an ethnohistoric researcher and archaeologist in 1985. I'm afraid this really dates me, and a little embarrassed. Later, when I began writing professional papers, I promoted a collaborative indigenous archaeology, and I also have a half a page of references having to do with that. So in 1993, I got my PhD from the University of Connecticut, and in 1997, I got that coveted tenure-track professorship at a major university, tenure-track position at Indiana University. So I was on my way. And in 1999, so only 4 semesters into my tenure-track position, I left academia. And I left academia for tribal government. I was offered a position with the Mohegan tribe of Connecticut to, as they called it, the manager of their archaeology historic preservation office. And this is before they have a formal TIPO now, but in those days these kinds of activities were handled under the cultural department. And I was one of 4 offices in the cultural department. I didn't even have to think about it much. So I spent altogether 14 years earning in college, earning 2 master's degrees and a PhD, all aiming at being a college professor. And just starting out into that, when I finally got my break, I'm out. And I'm in tribal government instead. And if we're talking, this is all leading up to SKC and the major in tribal historic preservation. But my 10 years that I spent in tribal government was so influential in how we created the program at SKC. That's sort of why we're going over this. I hope it hangs together for you. This was sort of my philosophy early on. So this is 1995. And this is when I started working with the Mohegan. So in 1999, I actually leave academia and go work full-time for the tribe. But I started in 94, actually. So they got federal recognition in April, and I started working with or March, and then I started working with the tribe in June or July of 94. And by 1995, we actually start doing field work in a larger way for the tribe. But this is written with Melissa Tanaquidgen Zobel, who was Melissa Fawcett at the time. And she's the executive director of the Mohegan Tribe Cultural Department, my boss, for the 10 years that I worked at Mohegan. And she's also the tribe's tribal historian and also the tribe's medicine woman. So she wears the 3 hats. And this is what we wrote in 1995. I won't read it, so you can just go ahead and look at that for the moment. And the next section of my talk is lessons from tribal government. So there's the emblem of the Mohegan tribe and their new government office building, which I never have stepped foot in because it was built after I left. I left in 2009, and this was built after that. So the first lesson from tribal government is always, and I mean always, work with the members. And so this is just a couple of examples of that. Up above on the upper left, we have, this is Red Moon, and this is Sharon Maynard, and this is my associate, Elaine Thomas. All tribal elders, and we were actually out beyond the stone wall in the woods looking for historic sites back there. This is a little program we put on. They're not all tribal elders, but most of them are. And we're also surveying for historic sites here. And finally, this is a picture of a young me right there, and the Mohegan Council of Elders. The Mohegans have, I don't know if any of you are familiar, but they have a really interesting tribal government structure. They have a bicameral government. So they have 2 elected councils. One is the Tribal Council, and one is the Council of Elders. The Tribal Council is 9 members, and the Council of Elders is 7 members. And the Council of Elders does a number of things. It acts as a Supreme Court, and it deals with all things religious, cultural, historic, and these are the folks who I worked for. When I first came on board, I worked directly for the Tribal Council, but soon afterwards they actually switched the Cultural Department to be supervised by the Council of Elders directly, and it was an amazing move. Not that there was anything wrong with the Tribal Council, but the elders were so much more available to us. The Tribal Council had a great big sort of destination resort empire to manage. And so when they put us under the elders, we got the attention that I think we deserved. And that was really, I'm very grateful for that. That's weird. Okay. One of the things I'm most proud of that we did at Mohegan is we created an archaeological field school, which started in 1995 and went through 2009. So I directed 15 years of archaeological field schools. And one of the reasons I'm most proud of this is the reason we created it is when the tribe got its federal recognition in 1994, they had no reservation at all. And they started reconstituting their reservation under the agreement for their recognition. And suddenly they were a landed Indian tribe again, and they needed to start to assess the historic and cultural resources that were left. Not only that, but they had plans for a huge empire. Has anyone here ever been to Mohegan Sun? The couple people back there? You know that it's impressive. And so one of the things that the tribe wanted to make sure was that as they built up their world, they didn't tear down their historic and cultural resources. And so our office was responsible for making sure that that didn't happen. But they had, in 1995, they had literally no resources. They couldn't keep their copier in their tiny little office working at first. Literally no resources. So I created this as a way to provide archaeological services for the tribe at essentially no cost to the tribe. It's still going on today. So why? Of course, they could contract archaeological services with no problem, well into this period of time or today. So the fact that the field school became a kind of a fixture I think is a testament to how the place that we made for it within the community. And these are some of this is the field school in front of the Mohegan Church, built in 1831. It was the center of Mohegan life for over a century. This is a couple of other field schools at Cochigan Rock, which is an important sacred and historic site. It's the largest glacial erratic in New England, which happens to sit on the old Mohegan Reservation. It's a standing rock that was moved there by a glacier, but it's the size of a 4-story building. And it's said that Uncas, the original sachem of the Mohegan tribe, used to convene his councils here at the rock. Well, we are providing archaeological services for the tribe, but that wasn't the only purpose behind the field school. We wanted to make sure that we were providing our students that indigenous archaeology perspective. And so we did this by basically doing things other than doing excavations. One of the things that we did is we would have enrichment type activities including speakers. We have native scholars and professionals and dignitaries from all over the area come in to speak to our students, representing a whole slew of different tribes. By the way, this is Melissa Tanaquidjian-Zobel, my boss and the director of the cultural department, and Sherman Paul Maliseet and Mickey Agenstada Cherokee. This is the late Nana Pashamit. Was a sonnet Wampanoag. And this is John Brown, who was the Tipo over at Narragansett, and I believe still is. So we would spend 2 or 3 days a week with these kinds of activities. And I calculated that out in my head sort of for the 15 years, means that we probably put together somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 programs for our students over that period of time. And that they also included demonstrations. And so this is Sharon Maynard again, I think we saw earlier. She's, by the way, on the Council of Elders today and has been for some time. This is Sister Betty Jean Cordaire. She's the tribe's storyteller, and some drummers teaching some Mohegan songs. And we would do demonstrations, for example, firing. This is called Shantok ware, Shantok pottery. It's replicated, and we had a wonderful Tuscarora potter who worked with us in our office, and she would replicate the actual vessels from Fort Shantok from the 17th century Mohegan ceramics. And we had dozens of different types of activities like this that we would do. We would also take field trips to nearby reservations. This is a trip that we took to the Mashantucket Pequot Reservation to look at some excavations that they were doing. And this is Steve Silliman's excavations at the Pocatuck Eastern Pequot Reservation, and we would visit over there. I think this fellow is James Quinn, and I think he's pictured in a couple other slides. He's the Tipo today. So over the 15 years, we had somewhere like 42 or 43 Mohegan tribal members who actually took the field school for credit. It's a 6-credit course through Eastern Connecticut State University. And even though I was an employee of the tribe, at least for the last 10 years of the 15-year period that we did the field schools, we struck up a great relationship with the continuing education department at Eastern. And so we were offering 6 credits for the 6 weeks in the field. And we were attracting students from all over the country. We were attracting native students, but we were really proud that Mohegans chose to take the field school, and we had over 40 of them who did so. And the only person in this picture who's not Mohegan is this woman right here, but everybody else is Mohegan. And we did great field work, 15 years of it. That program is still going on today, and it's really become a fixture at Mohegan, even though it's not really economically necessary like when we started it. I love this picture. I included it. 3 generations of Mohegan women who were all involved in excavations, and this is actually at Fort Shantok itself here. This is a walkway we discovered. There used to be a building here, which was a mid-19th century Mohegan school that was set up by some missionaries. Nobody knew exactly where it was, and we were able to locate that. And this is an interesting site, a multi-component site. It had archaic through woodland all the way up to reservation era occupation right here. And I won't read these, but before I left, I asked some of our former students, the Mohegan tribal members, what they thought. of their participation in the field school. And you can take a look at this. It's really quite striking to me how they perceive the field school as putting them in touch with their ancestors. And I will say that there's something, I don't know how many of you have done archaeology, but there's something very embodied about, in physical and tactile, about archaeology and touching the past. And if it's done right, if it's done in a respectful manner, and if it's done as we did it under the auspices of the Council of Elders, and we were very, very careful never to exceed our mandate, and we always had good reason for doing what we were doing, then I think that it can be a very fulfilling experience for the tribal members. And as you can see, I think that was very, very true. So those are some of the lessons that came out of tribal government for me. Oh, and just as an aside, many of the graduates of the, or alumni, let's say, of the field school went on to be elected to council. And the field school, participation in the field school actually became a kind of, a kind of accomplishment that the tribal membership took as a qualification, one of many, of course, but a qualification for being elected to tribal government, and particularly to the Council of Elders. So we had elders who took the field school and then became, which was supervised or under the auspices of the Council of Elders, and they themselves went on to become members of the Council of Elders and our supervisors. So that was really a kind of a cool circular movement that happened there. Oh, hold on. I'm going to go back to this. So this is actually from a book called Collaborating at the Trail's Edge, and this was edited by Steve Silliman, who's at UMass Boston, and is all about how field schools can be applied in collaboration with the tribes. And the name of this my paper was "The Tribe and the Trowel: An Indigenous Archaeology and the Mohegan Archaeological Field School." And this is actually out of the Amerind Foundation. So we presented this at the American Anthropological Associations as a session, and the Amerind Foundation gave us their award and published our papers as a book, as an edited volume. And so that was really quite nice. And this is really pretty much at the end of towards the end of my tenure with the Mohegans. Well, I guess you know where you are. So I make my way from there out to here, and I put together, thinking about what I did for the previous 15 years and the 10 years I spent in tribal government, I thought we have to do something about training Indigenous archaeologists. So for myself, when I went to work in tribal government, I found that a lot of what I was taught in graduate school did not apply to what I was doing. I needed to relearn a lot. And I haven't been thinking about why that is. But I think that when you're in academia, you're sort of trained to think about yourself and your career and science. We used to say we were sacrificing everything for science. We're out there we need to dig, we need to find new things, we need to make a contribution. At the tribe, None of that was important. Publishing wasn't important. Promotion wasn't important. Tenure wasn't important. And so I had to think, well, what was important? And I think that in academia, we're taught a lot about the now. We're taught a lot about what we need to do as professionals in our field to progress in the field, to make a contribution in the field, to make a career, and that sort of thing. And at the tribe, I had to forget all of that. Because actually the responsibility, looking back on it, our responsibility was less to ourselves in the present and more a responsibility to the tribal ancestors and also the tribal descendants. So looking into the past and looking into the future. And that's the way that the elders, at least that's the impression that they gave me, and that's what I needed to concentrate on. And also how important the culture was, and how important the language was, and how important the land was. And so I had to start thinking about, well, how can we train? I mean, our indigenous students could go to the University of Montana. They can get themselves a degree in anthropology, and they can go on into the field, no problem, right? But if they want to work in a tribal community, in their own communities, there really probably is a better way to train them. And so I started putting together a proposal for a bachelor's degree in tribal historic preservation. And at the time, I had a research appointment at the university. So I took it to the university. Nothing. No nibbles. Not interested. I was very disappointed. And so I rattled around. I was teaching some classes, adjuncting and so on. And I was new to the area. By the way, you want to hear a funny story? So, I'm sorry, I'm going to digress for a second. So when I came out here, I decided I was going to apply to a 3-month temporary archaeology position, like at a Glacier National Park. Just a nice opportunity to get to know the archaeology of a new place. And after I applied, some months later, I got a notice that my application had been discarded. Not that they had found that, so I said, that's very odd. And so I called. It was very difficult to find. The personnel or human resources office was in Arizona or something like that. So I finally got to somebody and got the explanation for why my application was thrown out of the pool. It's because I'd never taken a field school, which was one of the qualifications for the job. I said, I directed 4 archaeological field schools before I started working for Mohegans. I actually at that point had directed 19 archaeological field schools, 4 for the University of Connecticut and 15 for Eastern Connecticut State University in association with the tribe. They said, yes, we know that, but you never took one. So. And that's really true. And that's like no joke. But it's funny. So Salish Kootenai College, I sort of vaguely knew about SKC, and it just so happens that Frederica Hunter, was at the time the director of the American Indian Student Services down at the U, and she and we had become friends. And I was with her at American Indian Business Leaders Conference, and she was sitting with her, and she said, "That over there, that's Joe McDonald." He's the president of Salish Kootenai College. Let me introduce you to him. So I said, okay, and I introduced myself, or she introduced me, and I said, I've got a proposal for a tribal historic preservation major. Would you be interested? He said, meet me at my office, like next week. And he and Alice Oxley, who was at the time the vice president of academic affairs, we met, we talked about it. I gave them my formal proposal. I had actually typed out. And they said, he said to me, Joe said to me, Alice will take care of you. And so I started teaching there. We started working on the how to put this together. And we put together a kind of a workflow that I think resulted, obviously we were successful, resulted in the major. So it took us a while. I have to say the thing that probably really helped is that we got, or I got a 6-figure grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. That really, really helped. And we put together a process by which to create this major. And it involved consultation with the TIPOs across the state. What kinds of training, what kinds of background will help students who want to do what you do. So we did that. We consulted with TIPOs in historic preservation departments across the state. We put together workshops for our faculty. We worked really, really closely with the upper administration. And in that vein, there was, I think it's fair to say, a lot of turnover in the upper administration. So I actually, in putting together the program, 3 presidents, 4 vice presidents of academic affairs. But that being said, every single one of them was incredibly supportive of the idea and the mission of putting this together. And I have to point out Carmen Taylor right here, who was at the time the 2nd vice president of academic affairs. But I think we did a lot of the nitty-gritty work with you, like the very formative foundational work I think we did together, and it was just, was a lovely experience, tense, and you never know how these things are going to turn out, but I think I got the grant when you were there, the NEH grant. So all the way up through, that was the other thing, is that, so even if we thought it was a good idea, even if it was supported by the upper administration, there is no other bachelor's degree in tribal historic preservation in existence anywhere. And so the question always was, we can be as enthusiastic as we want about putting this program together. Is Northwest Consortium of Colleges and Universities, the accrediting agency for SKC, and the U for that matter, are they going to go for it? Are they going to think that it meets all their criteria? So I will always be eternally grateful for you and for everyone else who worked with me, because it's the people, really the people that made all of this possible. The grant was nice, right? But it was really the people who I was working with on a daily basis. And it wasn't just the upper administration, it was the curriculum committee, who was, the curriculum committee at SKC is made up of all the department heads. So all the departments were involved. It's a very multidisciplinary major. And so we had a lot of buy-in from all manner of people up and down the administration at SKC. It was really quite amazing. These are some of our students in different settings. I'll talk a little bit more about that, about the students in just a little while. We also had a advisory committee who were essential for putting together the program. And Francis Auld at the top, he's not at the top of this list for nothing. Probably the most influential person on this list in terms of the final form of the major. In particular, and the students love you for this, the fact that the students had to take 6 native language classes, which is essentially all of them at the school. So it's beginning Salish or Kootenai 1, 2, and 3, and intermediate Salish or Kootenai 1, 2, and 3, or another native language that meets the criteria of being a college level course. So they can actually substitute, the students can actually substitute other native language courses for the second 3. They have to take Salish or Kootenai for the first 3. This was our compromise because of the mission of the college, is specifically to perpetuate the cultures of the Salish, Kootenai, and Pend d'Oreille people, but also giving them the flexibility to learn languages that will help them. And it actually turns out that once we got the accreditation and the program up and running, we rapidly grew, and we had students from 16 different tribes in the program by the end of the second year. So a lot of them, Salish and Kootenai is part of their curriculum, but also their own languages can be substituted for those second set of 3 courses. And I think that was a nice compromise that we achieved. This group gave us wonderful advice. As you can see, they represent TIPOs, they represent academics, people from the local community, people from far off. It was a very nice grouping. In addition to that, we were soliciting advice from other people, like Ira Matt, for example, who's the TIPO here at CSKT, and other people. So we were getting input, but this group was really critical, and Francis foremost among them. So thank you very much. Well, we also, in order to create SKC is a wonderful place in the sense that it had a very wide variety of courses already in the catalog. For example, Introduction to Anthropology and Cultural Anthropology, which are required courses in the major, were already being taught and already on the books. But we did need to eventually create 13 new courses in order to do the major. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't just replicating what was going on at the university. I'm looking for my pointer. So we do have archaeology, for example, Introduction to Archaeology, but if you'll notice that down below, all of the Native American Studies courses that were added to the curriculum. And by the way, one of the differences in our program as opposed to the university is that the program was based in Native American Studies, not in anthropology or some other field. So I was a professor of Native American Studies, not anthropology, not archaeology, and so our program was based in Native American Studies. And some courses, like for example, North American Archaeology, becomes a Native American Studies course. North American Archaeology, Indigenous Perspectives. And also our field school, for example, is Indigenous Archaeology Field School. We also have internships, tribal government or government, It could be, a lot of them were federal government placements, internships. The experiential learning, and I'll go on to talk a little bit about experiential learning. But experiential learning was a big, big part of the way that we developed the curriculum. The students were required to do 2 at the end of their sophomore year and the end of their senior year. They were required either to do a field school or an internship. So getting the students out into the field actually doing, as opposed to just learning from a book, was really crucial. Reminds me of your talk and about getting the students out there. That is really key to making the program, I think, come alive for our Indigenous students. So they have to do 2 of these, sophomore year and senior year, either an internship or a field school. Some students did 2 field schools, some students did 2 internships, and some students mixed them. It's their choice. So the flexibility that we built into the program, depending upon their interests, I think was also very crucial. We also introduced the introduction, so it has its own rubric there, Introduction to Tribal Historic Preservation and a capstone senior project as well. And so these are the courses that we added to the curriculum. I couldn't even see that. Time? Now? Okay. We'll go really fast. So it was really crucial for us to get to know the tribe, and this was a little slide I put for that, and the experiential learning part. So we replicated a lot of what we did at Mohegan in our program, got the students out into the field, visits to the tribal government, upper left, to the cultural committees, Salish and Kootenai cultural committees. We got them out into the field here, actually doing, this is for a course, not a field school, but learning how to do pedestrian survey, to local museums and local collectors. So this is bringing our classes. This is our lab class up at the top. This is the People's Center here on the left. And this is talking with folks at tribal government. We also did field work at Fort Kona, which is here on the reservation. It's the oldest standing structure in the state of Montana. This is the 1847 Hudson's Bay Trading Post. And especially what we would do out there is we would learn remote sensing techniques. So ground penetrating radar, magnetometer. We did low-level, high-quality aerial photography. This is kind of before drones really became popular, but with a tethered blimp, which is really interesting stuff. And they learned how to survey, and all of this was done at Fort Kona. I don't know if all of you noticed, and this is an important component of working here on the Flathead Reservation, it is a no-dig reservation. And so archaeology is simply not permitted here, and that made our working out our relationship with historic preservation and the tribal government really was a dynamic that we had to deal with. And that's the reason remote sensing, one of the reasons why remote sensing became so important to us. Sorry, Lori. We also did 2 years of field schools at Grant Corps Ranch, which was a partnership with the National Park Service. This is our tent village up top, working with the rangers and the staff of Grant Corps Ranch. This is in Deer Lodge, Montana. And finally, doing a lot of subsurface work. We basically were looking for any archaeological historic resources where they planned a new visitor center, and which we did find an important site there. They also had cows and cowboys. Was kind of fascinating, if you think about it, to have the native students basically excavating the Euro-American sites. There's a nice irony about that. And we did some wonderful archaeology work there And they provided us with a laboratory, for example, here, and it was a joint partnership, National Park Service and Salish Kootenai College, and we did that for 2 years. Sorry, I'm going very fast now. This is probably the thing I'm most proud of. We did a collaborative project with the Historic Preservation Department at the tribe, the field school, and the tribe together, and we worked on helping to preserve a rock art site. It was a project that the tribe had, and we were able to make a nice contribution to it. And this is part of our work there. I'm going to go really fast past all this. And finally, I asked some of our graduates to comment on what their experience was like with the program. And these are a few. I know that's a lot of words. A lot of our students have gone on to graduate school. A lot of our students have been hired by their tribes to do archaeology work. And a lot of this is reflected in their comments. It's interesting they definitely seem to key more into the technical aspects of the things that they learned than my Mohegan students. But they have had a very, very good experience. The last thing I want to talk about or just show you, is our graduates. And so in 2015, we had probably our biggest graduation. The first year was 2013. We had 4 graduates. By 2015, we had 14 graduates. And what was really cool, and up here on the top, nearly the entire first row. We went first because we were the newest major in the procession at graduation. But our majors filled up almost the entire first row of the graduating class of 2015. And so, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I don't know if we have time for any questions.